So, when you think of tick-borne illnesses in Florida, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most people, it's probably Lyme disease. But what if I told you the bigger, more common threat might actually be coming from something much, much closer to home? Today, we're comparing Bartonella and Lyme disease, and we're going to uncover a surprising truth about health risks in the Sunshine State.
And that brings us to this big question. When we're talking about these kinds of illnesses in Florida, where's the real risk coming from? Is it the pests you run into outdoors? Or could it actually be the pets we share our homes and lives with? The answer? Well, it really challenges what a lot of us assume.
So, we're putting two specific illnesses under the microscope, Bartonella and Lyme disease. And here's something you need to know right from the start. Both of them are seriously underreported in Florida. That means a whole lot of cases are probably going completely undiagnosed.
Now, this is where things get really interesting, because while they're both a concern, they are absolutely not an equal threat. Here in Florida, one of these is way more common than the other, and I'm guessing the answer isn't what you expect. Let's start with Bartonella. You might know it by its more common name, cat scratch disease. And yep, as that name suggests, the main way it spreads is a lot closer to home than most people realize.
Okay, get ready for a pretty startling number. A study in Florida found that a whopping 16.4% of cats were infected with Bartonella. Let that sink in. That's more than 1 out of every 7 cats, which just highlights how huge the potential for exposure really is.
And this quote just drives the point right home. You know, we've all heard that our pets can get us sick, but the data on Bartonella shows this isn't some old wives' tale. It is a documented risk, and it's one we really need to take seriously.
So here's the big takeaway for Bartonella. Because the symptoms can be kind of vague, and let's be honest, people don't always connect them back to their pets, it's believed to be widely underreported and very frequently misdiagnosed. It's like a hidden threat living right in our own homes.
All right, now let's switch gears to the illness that usually grabs all the headlines, Lyme disease. With Lyme, our focus shifts from our living rooms to the great outdoors, specifically to wooded and grassy areas. So, what is Lyme disease exactly? Well, it's an illness you get from bacteria that's transmitted through the bite of a very specific carrier, the infected black-legged tick, which you might also know as the deer tick. And this is absolutely crucial. The transmission isn't instant. First, an infected tick has to bite you. Then, it generally needs to stay attached for a good 36 to 48 hours before the bacteria can actually be transmitted.
This is exactly why moving fast is so important. If you find and remove a tick within 24 hours, your risk of getting Lyme disease drops a lot. So remember that detail after you've been outdoors. It's a huge part of prevention.
Okay, so when should you be on high alert in Florida? Well, thanks to our warm climate, ticks are a potential risk pretty much year-round. But their activity really starts to ramp up in the spring, and then it hits its absolute peak in the early summer.
All right, so we've looked at each one by itself. Now it's time to put them side by side. This is where the different levels of risk for Floridians become crystal clear.
This table gives us a fantastic direct comparison. Look at Bartonella. The carrier is cats in our homes. For Lyme, it's those black-legged ticks out in the woods. But the really key difference is right there in that third row. Bartonella is more prevalent in Florida, while Lyme is actually less common. And the risk factors? Totally different. Contact with pets versus a long, drawn-out tick bite.
And this chart just makes that difference impossible to ignore. You can literally see that Bartonella infections are reported way more often in Florida than Lyme disease. It directly answers that question we asked at the very beginning. So, we've gone through the science, we've looked at the stats, but what does all of this actually mean for you in your day-to-day life? Let's break down the most important things to remember.
So here's the bottom line. Both of these are underreported risks right here in Florida. But Bartonella is the more common threat, especially coming from animals. Lyme disease is still a concern for sure, but it's tied to very specific outdoor environments. The bigger picture here is that illnesses from ticks and fleas are on the rise, so understanding how they spread is just vital. And all of this brings us to the single most important message. When it comes to hidden health risks like these, awareness is, without a doubt, your best defense. Just knowing where the threat is coming from, whether it's a pet or a pest, is the most powerful tool you have to stay safe. So we'll leave you with this question. Now that you know the difference in risk between Bartonella and Lyme disease here in Florida, what are you going to do differently? What new signs are you going to watch for, both in your environment and maybe with your pets? Because that's how you turn this information into action.